Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to A Therapist for the Night. I am Katrina Fergus Yamani. I wanted to, oh, perfect. I can see everybody. Okay. Can you guys see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so this is our special night. I'm really excited about tonight. You know, each one is different, each one is special. And I'm always excited that whoever comes, it's just always encouraging to me, you know, always, every single time, I'm always encouraged. So really, really, really thank you for coming. And again, I just wanted to say that I put these workshops together. It's not for work, it's just because I am a social science nerd. And so this is why I've had these, especially for the beginning of the year, for the year 2021, one each month, I thought would be a good idea on different topics that are up and coming or that people are talking about or that are spiritual. And so tonight we're going to do some assessment and diagnosis. I have been an assessor for probably like 10 years at hospitals, at agencies, and I actually got a chance to work for the county, working with families for exactly 1 year. And then the contract expired and I moved on. But I have a lot of experience working with different cases, and that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to work with real life cases. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to do an assessment and diagnosis. Assessments are usually the first part of any counseling session. And so you want to ask all the questions, usually a psychosocial or biopsychosocial is put together with all the questions you ask on eating, sleeping, all the symptoms. And you put it together in a summary, a format, a written document, and that's usually an assessment. And then at the bottom, there's a diagnosis. What diagnosis would you give this person? And according to the diagnosis, please mute your phones if you can. And according to the diagnosis, then that's the treatment that you would, you feel best to provide. And so to diagnose, we have our handy diagnostic and statistical manual. And this is almost like the PDR for like nurses and doctors. So this is the DSM-5 that we use for mental health and therapy and to diagnose. It's like the Bible of mental health. And so 5 is the edition, it's the 5th edition. So it's the most current. And you'll find that in the DSM-5, a lot of things that were in DSM-4 are not there. They took it out. And some things they included that needed to be a diagnosis. And so the equivalent is, this is usually used in America, in the USA, but there's also called the ICD-10, which is an international version. So all countries, they came up with a one uniformed clinical diagnosis for all countries, and it's called the ICD-10. And you can also use that as well. But I guess in USA, they like to use the DSM-5. So we're going to look at 5 vignettes, which are actual real cases. And it just means little summaries, synopsis, or snapshots of real cases that have happened. And so some of them, 3 of them are from my Facebook page, Stories in Mental Health. And it'll be very interesting to know like what diagnosis you give for Derek, Cassandra, Sarah, Brian, and EJ. And it'll be multiple choice. So it's going to be a little easy. You could pick from there. You don't have to come from the top of your head. And then, you know, what referrals, you know, what do you think would be a good follow-up for this person? Okay, do you guys have questions before we start?
No.
Okay, and Babette is here. Babette is my, she is actually one of my peers in school. We graduated from a mental health program at City College. So nice to have her here.
Thank you.
Let's see.
I was hunting for my DSM.
Okay, so first we're gonna look at Derek. So Derek is an 8-year-old male. He crawls on the floor. I put a difficult one first. He crawls on the floor. At times he goes to the bathroom on himself. He has delays in developmental milestones, which is his walking and speaking. I conducted a mental health status exam on him, and he was oriented ×3, which means when they say oriented ×3, it means like they understand where they are, their orientation, they understand dates, time, and space. You know, like they know what the date is, they know today, they know their names. And the mental health status exam is, so it's a part of the psychosocial that you create. So you have all the symptoms, all the history on the person, but then you'll also have the mental health status exam, which looks at what they were like when they came in. Were they disheveled? Were they cleanly dressed? You know, how was their hair? How was their tone? Were they slurred at speech? So it looks at all the physical things as well as like emotional, you know, were they teary? Were they crying? Were they hysterical? Like what they were like when they were presented in front of you at the time. Could they answer questions? Were they sharp in their mind? So when it says oriented ×3, when you see that, it's written OX3, which means that they were, you know, they appeared stable. He appears to zone out. And then the mother states to me, speak to the therapist, like be respectful, but he's looking down the whole time. So I call his name and he allows me to touch his hand, yet no answer. He keeps looking down. I think he hears us. So I say, let's see, to his mom. So randomly, he's been in the room for maybe 20 minutes. And I say, you know, on my desk is a container. What colors are the pens on the desk in the container? And without looking up, he's like, blue, red, green, and gray. He had it right. Like, wow, like that is his, he like took a picture in his mind. You know, that's some intelligence there. He took a picture in his mind and he was observant of where everything was, and he would know the details to how many pens and what color was in a container on the desk without even looking up. That was fascinating to me. Okay, so with that, what do you think Derek has? Social phobia, which is now called, which used to be called social anxiety. Do you think he has autistic disorder or developmental disability? What would you guess?
I'd say B.
I'd say
Oops. Yeah.
I say autism because that's kind of like a Rain Man characteristic from that Tom Cruise movie.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I say autism.
That's a close guess.
I say A, because I think looking down and not, you know, trying to engage other people, whatever, he's probably a little shy and he has problem with his, you know, being social, that social anxiety. So I say A.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you guys know what developmental disability is?
No.
that's what I thought.
Nope.
Developmental disability is the now politically correct for mental retardation. We no longer say mental retardation. It's a stigma. Especially people are like, oh, you retard, like that is like the worst, right? So now it's called developmentally disability. Some people say developmentally delayed. That's another word, but the actual diagnosis, developmental disability. So
So
with that,
Katrina,
which one? Go
Katrina,
ahead.
excuse me. If you say mentally challenged, is that okay? Okay as well. Excuse me.
Yeah, mentally challenged is just a description. It's not a diagnosis, because there's a few people who are mentally challenged, right? But they're not necessarily, it could be any diagnosis, right? It just says that you have a chronic mental illness, but you don't know which one.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, you guys could ask questions. We're not gonna wait till the end. You can ask questions. So with that, have you changed your mind, or?
Put back the description again, Katrina.
Sure.
Well, in your description, Katrina, you do say developmental. He has delays in developmental milestones. So I always thought that more as physical, but I guess it could be physical or mental.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of all of
Right.
them. So looking at that again, I would say the number C, developmental.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to stay with my answer because I've seen The Good Doctor, and I know there are different variations of the autistic disorders, like a spectrum. I just don't. I think he's on a part of that spectrum. So I'll
Like a
stick
low
with mine.
functioning spectrum. I don't know. I'm caught between B and C, Katrina.
Yes. Okay, so the answer is that you actually get you have them go to a neuropsychologist, so that they could test the brain and nerves for like reflex motor skills, but you suspect that, and so
Right.
in these cases, because they're children usually too, right, you don't want to give the wrong diagnosis, so that's why you refer them to where they could do more intense testing, right? But it turns out he had developmental disability. And the way you know that is because autism is very, very, very close to developmental disability, very close. And sometimes, in some cases, they can have both. But the trick was that I was able to touch his hand and he was okay with it. Those who are developmentally disabled, they don't mind touching. It's okay for them. But autistic, they're so sensitive. It's like, don't touch me. That's why they're hearing, they're like, they rock because they're hearing, and I didn't put like rocking in there. That's something too that would have been a giveaway for autism. But they rock, they tend to cover their ears because all their senses, they close their eyes, they do this, they blink a lot because the senses are so intense. They're blocking light out, and it's kind of fun for them. And sometimes they'll wear headphones too, those who are autistic, because the noise is just too much. And it's, for us, it's like normal, but for them it's intensified. So if you touch them, that's why you can't touch, like you can't, or hugs, they don't like it, it's too much for them. But developmental disability, those they are able to, you can touch them, you can hug them, they're actually very affectionate. So that's one of the signs. So the answer is C.
But
So
also too, Katrina, I mean,
huh?
I think you, for the autism,
Uh-huh.
again,
What else do you want to add?
you have pretty high functioning people on the autistic spectrum, some that you could touch.
Yes.
So this definitely need more investigation for you to arrive at at a diagnosis.
Yes. Yeah, and usually for that, it's like usually when they're older, you know, you can see the difference. Exactly what you're saying, Bobette. That's so true, especially when you're older.
Mhm.
They call it mild. It's like mild. Or it's kind of like, I forgot the word for uh, being on that spectrum. It'll come to me when you're on the other side of the spectrum of autism, where it's like mild. I forgot the name right now.
High functioning, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe you could look it up for me. All right, so this one is Cassandra. And yes, Babette, jump in anytime. Your expertise in this is very valuable. So this is Cassandra. She is a 10-year-old fifth grader. You're called in to do a threat assessment. She threatens to kill her peers, their family, and her teachers. She uses strong profanity and displays extreme anger. Parents have a hard time with her follow through. Like she won't follow through on things and complete things. She threatens families have asked the principal to send the police to her home. She is defiant for getting on the school bus. For 15 minutes, she'll make the bus wait. And she refuses to follow the schedule. And she'll tell them, the school bus, they're like, they could wait. The students could wait till I get on. Anyway, she refuses to follow schedules. And the behaviors have occurred over the past 5 years. Now, something with diagnosis that I should say is the two top things that therapists look at when you're assessing a person and giving a diagnosis is everybody looks at the symptoms. Like that's just the big thing, right? But you look at the frequency and duration. Those are like the two top
Yep.
keys that helps you. What's the frequency, meaning how often, and what is the duration, for how long have these symptoms happened? So that's really key. So her behaviors happened over the past 5 years. You guys got that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So would you give her generalized anxiety disorder,
Definitely.
oppositional
ODD.
defiant disorder,
Mm-hmm.
or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder?
I'm gonna go
I'll
with
say
B,
B.
oppositional
Yeah.
defiant behavior.
Okay.
I actually had
Anybody
a
else?
kid like that.
Anybody else?
I'm gonna go with A. She just didn't, want to be around people.
Okay.
Hmm.
Anyone else? No one says attention deficit hyperactivity disorder?
No, I'm going to go with B as well, Katrina. She seemed pretty defiant there. So
Mhm.
Yes, yes.
Right.
All right, you want to know the answer or anybody else wants to guess?
I think I'll go with C because, I mean, she don't want to get on the bus. She's kind of hyper. She doesn't follow through with stuff. And I think she has some kind of hyperactive disorder. So yeah, I'm guessing.
Oh, wait. I agree with you, I think. Yeah, I've seen that. I think I'm going to go back to C. I hope I'm not wrong. I'm going to go to C.
Okay, well, the answer is B, oppositional defiant behavior.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's not so the thing with diagnosis, right, is sometimes it could be one of the three, it could be one out of two, but you always want to choose what's best. And that's the tricky thing, because what's best to everyone is different. Like which answer is best that you're choosing might be, in your mind, that's the best answer, right? So that's why this is always helpful, because it's the standard. It brings us back to, okay, so now we could look up one, she's 10 years old, right? And that's a childhood disease. And so these are things that if you, as you continue assessing, you realize a 10-year-old, like oppositional defiant, is a childhood mental illness. Also, attention deficit disorder is also. General anxiety disorder is a very heavy, weighty diagnosis to give a child. And so, or anybody. So you have to really make sure that like that's it. So the thing I want to say about oppositional defiant disorder is that yes, it's the key is they use threats a lot. They are defiant, right there. They're defiant. They refuse, like those are the key words. They refuse to follow schedules. They will not follow through, even with their parents. Like their parents can't get them to do much. Now, there's another one that is often given, which is also intermittent explosive disorder. And that one is like, it shows more anger, and it gets physical. So oppositional defiant disorder doesn't get physical. It's hardly ever. It's more threats, right, and more intimidation, but it's nothing physical. And attention deficit disorder, you know, so for oppositional defiant disorder, she's 10, but when she reaches like 18, you have to give a new diagnosis. It's a childhood disorder. Like adults, you would think should have it, but according to the DSM, after that you have to choose something else. But attention deficit disorder is also childhood, and they are talking about it, why it shouldn't be included with adults, because some adults say they have the same symptoms even when they grow in adults, and people are like, that makes sense, because if you have it when you're young, it's not, does it go away as you get older? You know, there's some people who have attention deficit disorder, or maybe they have, it used to be called ADD, which is just the attention part. Kids have a difficult time with the attention part. So if she was having problems in school, it would probably be because of her attention. But hyperactivity could also go with it. So you can have both. And that's why they call it ADHD. Do you guys have any other questions before we move on?
I like the distinction you made on age there. I've always thought that you could have ADD like even as an adult.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you say you changed the diagnosis later.
Yeah, some people are like refuting, you know, there's a group of people that are refuting like it should stay a childhood disease, and then some people are like, no, it needs to be
Wow.
brought to the older people, because it explains a lot, because some people who are adults believe they have it. They
Yeah.
have it, they have all the signs, they have all the symptoms, the frequency, the duration all match, but yet you know, they're now moving into it. People are becoming more flexible about it, but
Yeah. They can't just add another A on the front, adult attention deficit disorder.
I know, right? AADHD.
Yeah.
I know you're coming up with something good here, Barry. You know, hopefully they will. I mean, it's the 5th version. So like caffeine, I think caffeine addiction wasn't in there at one time, and now it's in there, right? So as we become more modern in our
And
understanding and
also
thinking,
electronic disorders. I mean, addiction
and
with your
addictions,
device.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's true
that's
too.
a new addition too.
Okay, so this is Sarah. Sarah's a 35-year-old female, and she comes to your office and complains of sadness most days and anxiety experience from her new job. Upon your intake, you find she is not sleeping well and difficulty eating. You learn that her mother passed away 3 months ago, and she recently moved into a new house. Symptoms have been seen in the last 3 months. She has 3 children and she has been married for 10 years.
This lady have a lot going on. Her mom just passed away. She's starting a new job. I mean,
Yes. So do you think she
there's
has
a lot going
adjustment
Pressure.
on.
Sounds like
disorder
pressure.
with a mixed mood for anxiety and depression? Do you think she has
Right.
major depressive disorder, or do you think she has dependent personality disorder?
I think it's B.
It's definitely A.
I go with B also.
I'll say A and B.
Let's say A.
I go with A.
Okay, so she does have a lot going on here, and Babette
Yes,
hit it
she
on the
does.
nose when she said that. Um, she complains of sadness most days. That's frequency, that's often, and anxiety. So it's not just sadness, it's also anxiety from her
Mhm.
new job. So she has a new job, and then she's not sleeping well. She has difficulty eating. So that might be the anxiety and sadness. You learn that her mother passed away within
Right.
3 months, and she recently moved into a new house.
That sounded like my life a few years ago.
A few of us,
Yeah.
a few of us can relate. Yes.
Yeah. My mom passed away, had to move
Oh,
to, yeah, that's me right there.
oh,
Oh my goodness.
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, all of us at one time have had,
Mhm.
life just come at us. And she was given, because it was in the last 3 months, she was giving adjustment disorder. Now,
Right.
we were talking about heavy, so the answer is A. We were talking about
Mhm.
heavy, I think someone wants to come in. Let me check.
Yeah, I just want to give the women my condolences.
Oh, thank you so much. Um, it's been a while now. I am still, when you lose your parent, I think no matter how long it's been, it's kind of like never ending. You kind of just don't get over it, at least in my case. But you cope better as the day go by. So thank you on that.
You got it. Mhm.
Yeah, that's hard. And I love that you brought that up. You were really vulnerable, because it helps us as clinicians to understand when people sit in front of us. There's empathy there.
Yep.
It's not just
Mm-hmm.
tell me about your problems. There's empathy there, and that's part of the connection, that the working relationship that is made, the bond that's made, is because you have to be able to empathize. And that's what makes you a really good clinician, because the more you're able to empathize, the more insightful you are about life in general for yourself. And then you could realize it for other people outside of yourself. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I did choose, it's definitely A, adjustment disorder. With mixed mood, because she had anxiety and depression. So anxiety disorder is, I was talking to you about heavy and weighty diagnosis. Adjustment
Mm-hmm.
disorder is one of the light diagnoses. So, for like kids, anyone could get this diagnosis. And the DSM says it's usually within the first 6 months. After that, you have to give a
Mm-hmm.
totally different diagnosis.
Right.
Yeah, within the year. I mean, it could go up until a year, but because maybe you're unsure, and it could then be adjustment disorder unspecified, right? But
Mm-hmm.
because so many things are happening in her life, she's having a hard time adapting to what's happening, adjusting to what's happening in her life, whether it's good or bad news. Stress comes along with it.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
there are adjustment disorders, just depression, adjustment disorders, just anxiety. They also have a conduct disorder. So adjustment disorder with conduct, disturbance of conduct. So because things are, reckless behavior due to all the things that are happening to you in your life. And it might be really negative, so it's almost like an acting out because of what's happening. Now, someone said major depressive disorder together. So you only need one. So if it's mixed mood and there's already sadness stated, major depressive is a harder diagnosis, and it's, within at least a year time. So from adjustment disorder, you could, if the symptoms do not change, or if they're the same after a year, then you give the new diagnosis. It could be major depressive disorder, but not at the same time, because you already have adjustment disorder with mixed mood. So that says there's sadness there. So you don't need to put major depressive disorder. But that's a common mistake that people make. But as you diagnose more, you always think, what is best and what is the least? We caution on the side of what is the least instead of what is the most heaviest. You don't go right to, like, for example, dependent personality disorder. So diagnoses are usually under the umbrella of mood or addiction or personality or impulsive. So like ADHD is like an impulsive. And what would you do? I didn't say for the last one, with the young lady on the bus who made the bus's way, and we gave her the oppositional defiant disorder. We didn't say like what we would do, but I ended up going there and doing a threat assessment because, they were calling the police on her. So we did a threat assessment and a crisis contract that she will, abide to this contract, and she did well. But what do you guys think about this one? Like, what would you prescribe? What would be your treatment for Cassandra? Yeah.
I'd say go see Patrina and talk it out.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Harry. Okay, yes, a therapist. Yes, definitely to go see a therapist. Yeah. Now, would you give medicine? Would you think of her having medicine? Some people go straight to that. That's a good question.
I don't think medicine is, unless she asks for it, because maybe she can't sleep or it's affecting her life significantly. I don't think you just give medicine, away.
Yes.
I know that a lot of therapists are quick to give medicine because they get paid from it, I heard. But yeah, let the patient tell you how bad it is, and assess it from there.
Yes. Val, you were going to say something?
I want to say that, to give medicine, sometimes people become so dependent on it, and, it causes an addiction. So to give medicine, no, I wouldn't. Because, as time goes by, I'm pretty sure she'll learn to, if she have a good therapist like you, she'll be able to deal with it and kind of get herself in another area where she feels a little better.
Yes.
But what I'm worried about is the kids.
Yeah.
What you do in the kids, because I'm a kid freak. I'm always a hawk when it comes to the kids. What happens to the kids? I mean, in that case, would you find like some kind of social worker or someone to take those kids temporarily or put them in a safe place until she gets over her sickness? What happens? I'm afraid of this part.
Right. Well, both you and Cheryl definitely on the same complementing solution where she's it's mild, like it's a 6-month and mild diagnosis, and so to just if it's major depressive disorder, right, then it has become more chronic. Then you could send her for assessment, a medication assessment to see, right? But for something that's a lightweight, like what you're saying, in 6 months, she could, definitely have better control. And what Cheryl said about functioning, that's key. So if she's unable to function, like if the person's unable to function and it's been like, she's having a hard time getting out of bed, I mean, then it's like depressive disorder. So, she's not eating, she continues to not eat, not sleep, and her health is at stake, then yes, medication might be helpful. But yes, it's the last straw. It's like when everything else does not work, because you really want functioning. I have a friend who takes medication for her depression, and I love her personality about it. She's like, listen, it's helping me to be a better me. Why wouldn't I take it? That's what she says. Because when I don't take it, I am not me. I'm terrible. I don't like how I feel. I don't like the way I am. But when I take my medication, after they get the right dosage, I'm good. She's like, listen, it's almost like people who, if you could work out or change something about you, some people, would be like, yes, if I'm going to be a better me, if it's going to enhance who I am, whether it's physically or emotionally, I'm going to do it because I want to be a better version of me. And that's how she saw medication. And I had never really seen anybody like that, but she's a good example for me of that medication can help when it's needed,
Yep, that's great. Patrina,
Yeah.
please explain the last one on the last slide, the C.
Oh, dependent personality
You
disorder.
can go over it again.
Yeah, so dependent personality disorder, let's look at it. It's if I could find.
I'm wondering if my kids have this.
Oh, it's usually older. It's a personality disorder. Personality disorders start from the very beginning. So, we talked about duration, if somebody all of a sudden becomes dependent, then it's not a personality disorder. It has to be something that you have seen since they were young until this, I mean, over years and years. And then you see it. But there are about 8 or 9 I think there's like 8 personality disorders. And dependent personality happens to be one of them. I threw it in there to try to throw you guys off because she had so much going on in her life that she would be dependent. Her kids, by the way, she has a husband, so that's helpful. Like he can help her with that. So there's antisocial personality disorder, there's narcissistic personality, there's borderline, there's histrionic, and then there's dependent. I want to read that one because, and there's avoidant. All right, so this one, it says, a pervasive and excessive need to be taken care of that leads to submissive and clinging behaviors and fears of separation, beginning by early adulthood, you see, not for children, and presents in a variety of contexts as indicated by 5 or more of the following. They have difficulty making everyday decisions without an excessive amount of advice and reassurance from others. They need others to assume responsibility for most major areas of his or her life. Has difficulty expressing disagreement with others because of fear of loss of support or approval. Has difficulty initiating projects or doing things on his or her own because of a lack of self-confidence in judgment or abilities rather than a lack of motivation or energy. Goes to excessive lengths to obtain nutrients and support from others to the point of volunteering to do things that are unpleasant. Feels uncomfortable or helpless when alone because of exaggerated fear of being unable to care for himself or herself. Urgently seeks another relationship as a source of care and support when a close relationship ends. Lastly, is unrealistically preoccupied with fears of being left to take care of himself or herself. So that's an extreme chronic dependency on others that they can't make decisions. Mostly those are the highlights, that they don't make decisions. They have a very difficult time, or they have a need to be taken care of. So you'll find they're in relationships a lot. They can't be on their own, like literally they can't be on their own. So now listen, this is a disclaimer I should have said at the beginning. You know, when I took this class on personality, abnormal personality, do you remember this, Babette? Abnormal personality disorder. We took a class, and the first disclaimer in the class is, just like medical students, as soon as you start hearing terminologies, you're like, I have that. As soon as you start hearing, no, definitely have that one. No, I have that one. It's very common for that to happen, okay? It does not mean that you have it, okay? It does not mean that you have it. So I'm just making sure that you guys, you know, are okay. So it's just common that happens. You're like, I think I have that, you know? Even
Woo,
physical
thanks for
things.
telling us.
Yeah, in physical, you're like, wait, I have that. You know, we hear about illnesses, diseases. We're like, I have COVID. I think I have it. You know, it's like, okay, let's be rational. Don't get nervous. All right, so let's move on. I think this is the last one coming up. Brian. Okay. So school reports Brian, who is 13-year-old boy, has a history for setting fires and stealing. He is described by his peers. He's described by his peers as being a bully. Sorry, typo there. Brian states he is not a bully, but that the other students don't like him and he is standing up for himself. Brian has a history of telling lies and can be charming with adults. For the past 18 months, he continues to threaten harm to other students and has been suspended twice for punching a male student on the playground and pushing a female student to the ground in the school cafeteria. His grades have been declining, and he often skips school classes. Okay, so let's see about Brian. Does he have antisocial disorder, conduct disorder, or post-traumatic stress disorder? He's 13. He tells lies, he steals, he sets fire. He actually threatens and harms people. He skips school. Which one would you say?
I'm gonna go with A, antisocial disorder, because all those have to do with dealing with other people.
I'm looking at C. I don't know, because sometimes kids are looking for help, and they reach out and they do crazy stuff to get that help. You know, sometimes they don't know who to turn to, but they'll do things to get attention where they can, you know, be able to talk to someone about whatever. Something may be going on in his home, and he needs someone to talk to. So, I'm looking at C.
I
I'm
wanted to
going
say
to go
B.
with B. I'm
Yeah,
going to go with B. Looks
that's
like a
what I
lot of
wanted
things
to
are.
say too.
Oops.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well,
B, okay.
Oh no, I'm second guessing myself because conduct, I think, is more of a symptom, but it probably comes from this
It's
anti.
actual disorder.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm torn between A and B actually.
Okay, that's fine. All right, you guys ready? B, conduct disorder. Now,
yeah, got one right. Yay.
this was a hard one. Okay, so it's okay, cut yourself slack. This was a hard one. So you kind of needed to know this, which is important before you answered it. But I wanted to see how many people would say B, A, or C. So if we go back, he's 13. Conduct disorder happens between 10 and 15 years old. So he's definitely in the range for age. And conduct disorder, they're very fascinated with fire, stealing, even hurting animals. They bully. And conduct disorder is they can be defiant, like oppositional defiant disorder, but they get physical. So conduct disorder includes physical. So he's pushing, he's harming. And then look here, for the past 18 months, so the duration is like almost 2 years. That means he started doing this when he was like 11, right? So almost 2 years he's had this behavior. So this is a serious behavior. They skip school, right? So these are all conduct issues. Now, the thing about conduct disorder is that once they turn, when they're over 15 and they're usually like 18, you then, if they continue to have these same detrimental behaviors, it becomes a antisocial disorder up until adulthood. So if you said A, you're correct if he was older, but that's the exact same symptoms for someone who's older. But when they're younger, again, it's a childhood diagnosis for conduct disorder. Now, it could have been adjustment disorder that we just learned about, right? Adjustment disorder with mixed mood, or adjustment disorder with conduct, with disturbance in conduct. There's some kids who have that, but there's an emotional piece. So here, there's no emotional piece. He's just, he's just terrorizing other students. And there's no medicine for that. Actually, there's no medicine for like conduct disorder. It's so what treatment would you think would be good for this young man?
I'm not going to say a spanking, Katrina, even though I'm leaning
I
that
was
way.
waiting for someone
I'm
to
really
say
leaning that
that.
way.
I was waiting for someone to say that.
I'm thinking about the scripture, the rod will, help them.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So, anything else?
Can you explain C? What would C fall on?
Oh, C is gosh, sorry. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. I kind of put that in there because people tend to give a reason to why children are the way they are, when you look at their like family, their parents, their history. But if you had gotten more information, let's say, and you found out he had a history of trauma, that's definitely, we could have put that in. But for this young man, there was no history of trauma. So I threw that in there, but he has no history of trauma. He has no history of or reported abuses. This is his behavior since he was 11.
Oh, Patricia, it really helps when you said take the least, I forgot how you put it, but the least amount of heaviness, weightiness to the issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like PTSD is so heavy. I'm thinking about veterans and people who've been in the Army and they had this real traumatic event, and I didn't see that in his story.
Yes.
So,
and that's a good point, actually, that you bring up about post-traumatic stress disorder, both of you. PTSD is not everybody, and we learned this in class, right, Babette? Not everyone who suffers trauma has a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, because everybody have different coping mechanisms.
Exactly. I mean, there's horrific things that can happen that can cause post-traumatic stress disorder. But some people have gone through, and I base it on their resilience, and that had to do with the workshop I did on resilience. I mean, you're like, how could you think of people who've gone through these horrendous situations, and yet they pull through, but they have no diagnosis, no symptoms of having post-traumatic stress disorder. So that it's a facade. It's not true that just because you go through a traumatic event, you have to have post-traumatic stress disorder. No, it's not true. You can go through a traumatic event and not have that diagnosis. You may have sadness. You could have major depressive disorder, or a panic attack. Like panic whenever you're in certain situations that remind you of that. But post-traumatic stress disorder has many symptoms, and that's another thing. If you have just one of a symptom out of 10, that's why they say you have to have like 5 out of 8. Right? If you only have 2, it's not necessarily that you have that illness. So that's something to think about. Any other questions?
I missed that one, Katrina. I'm on my phone and it just randomly updated.
That's a good thing.
Oh.
So did you want to ask a question, or you want to say something, Babette, about that?
No.
Is there anything you want to say about anything?
No.
Okay, if you do.
Well, Patrina.
Yeah, Cheryl.
I'm sorry, but you were asking a question before about how would you help the child, and I'm kind of waiting to know what maybe would be a positive solution to it. I wouldn't medicate him, that's for sure.
Let's see. For conduct disorder, there's like no medicine for conduct disorder. Like attention deficit disorder, there is a medication for that, but for conduct disorder, there is no medicine for that.
You could probably help that child with some cognitive behavior therapy.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty much the best you can probably do.
Yeah. That's what some people come in contact, I guess there's some diagnosis there's no medicine for it. And it's just either therapy or there's special programs, or sometimes a good mentor program would work wonders. Get somebody positive, who's influential under their wing, you know, have, I call it life therapy. You know, have a good life talk, man to man, woman to woman, you know, and these kids sometimes, you know, it's like change their life around. You have a good life talk with them. Woo! You know, what you gonna do with your life kind of conversation. Oh, you gonna keep stealing all your life and end up in jail? Oh, you like tough talk. So I would definitely recommend a mentor program. Or what I did end up doing is I had it was a family, because sometimes you include the family. That piece is, you know, don't overlook the family helping. So family therapy or in-home counseling is a cheap way to get therapy in the home than in an office. It's more expensive in an office than if you can have a program that has a counselor, they call them, to an in-home counselor to go to the home and once or twice a week meet with the in their environment. And I've been an in-home counselor before. I've worked with the family or just with the kid, and it works wonders for them because they got that special attention. Anything else?
And if that doesn't work, what happens? Where you go from there?
If it doesn't work, I mean, then usually you put like like you do some kind of threat assessment where then you bring, I mean, the school should also be involved, but then you do a holistic plan. You have to sit down and then do a holistic plan. Right, so you might want to do an assessment on, well, maybe it might be something we're missing, right? We might have to test him at school to see if there's he could get an IEP, because maybe he's having a problem with learning. Right, we found that, and so that's why he was bullying, you know, that's why he was skipping school, because he couldn't read. Yeah, or he has some kind of developmental delay that they don't know about. So definitely testing. And then if they find something, then they do an IEP. The school counselors involved. There are counselors in school. There's other programs where you can have a TDT, which is a therapeutic day treatment program, a counselor in the school that works with a caseload of identified students with parents' permission. They sign like a release that, yes, please help me with my son or daughter, and they'll be able to work with them at school, and then also add in that piece at home. So they got counseling in school, they got counseling at home. Then it's, you know, it's up to the school. Like they could even do like a tutoring, and that's all in the IEP that they plan. It's an independent educational plan. So they could put tutoring in there to help them. So, you know, more accountability and everybody working together. And that's something that mental health is trying to do, because before it was like, oh, they see a counselor here, but nobody spoke. But now it's like this, we call it closing the loop, where everyone's involved, and they'll have case meetings, you know, and if they're seeing an outside therapist or doctor, they pull them in also. Doctors, they don't have a lot of time. So, but if they can, some doctors will come on, and they'll have a whole like group meeting, you know. It used to be like a conference call, everybody chimes in, how's he doing this week, how's she doing this week, she has this coming up, how we're going to help support her in that way, how we're going to help him with you know, this problem he's having. And everybody works together, like, and it'll be like once a month or something like that. You know, they check in. They're not playing with those students. They're like, we're not losing them. And the parents are involved too. The parents are in the meeting. So yeah, so it's called a wrap meeting. Yeah. This is the last one, EJ.
I'm sorry, I not one.
So EJ comes to your office with his mother and his aunt. EJ is 3 years old, who is very wise for his age. Mother and aunt state since he was 2 years old, he had an invisible friend who he speaks with often. They play together inside and outside. They eat together, they travel together. You ask EJ questions, and he states the name of his invisible friend and says he first saw him when they moved to the new home. He does not tell him to do, the invisible friend does not tell him to do anything bad and reports he's the same age as him. He describes him in detail and says he is in the room right now. He is listening and waiting to go home to see TV. Everyone in the home has started referring by name to EJ's invisible friend. He says it makes him happy. The family wonders if he is hallucinating.
He is 3 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And he
Pretty normal
started seeing his
behavior
friend
for a
when he
toddler.
was 2.
That's normal behavior, I think. See,
Yeah, that's pretty
Bipolar,
normal.
schizophrenia, or no diagnosis.
No diagnosis.
I say C, because that's a
No
normal thing.
diagnosis.
Yeah, because all kids have invisible friends.
My children had all of them had the same invisible
Same
friend
thing.
for years.
Mhm,
They even had a cat.
yeah.
That's how good they were.
Okay, this is the
Mom,
trick.
don't sit there. The cat is there.
I
So this
love
is
it.
trick, Maureen.
Mhm.
Did you eventually buy a cat?
No, because one of them were allergic to cats and he had asthma. But they adopted a cat outside our house and they would feed him. And then when my son would come in wheezing, I would say, "What's wrong with you?" "Oh, you was near the cat, huh?" And he would say, "No, no, I wasn't." But he'd be wheezing away. But that was just something that they did. All of them had this invisible cat and this invisible friend that they talked to all the time.
Do you think it happens more often when that kid don't have a sibling? They kind of generate this invisible friend because they don't have like a sibling, someone around their age or a little older to talk to. So this invisible friend become like a sibling.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Anybody else? Okay, so the answer is, okay, what is the answer? The answer is C, no diagnosis. Yep, no diagnosis. So I'm just kidding, it's B.
Can't be.
I'm kidding. It's really C. It's C. It's no diagnosis. Can you
Oh,
imagine?
you scared me, Katrina. You scared us.
It's like,
Could you imagine?
You
Giving a child,
that's impossible. The kid is 3.
exactly,
Mhm.
schizophrenia. Yes, that's just for older. Yeah, the onset of schizophrenia is 16 years old.
Right.
I think bipolar is the same. I think bipolar also is 16 years old. Bipolar disorder is a mood disorder, but you can hallucinate auditory and visual with bipolar disorder. It happens. So you have to be able to distinguish between the two with schizophrenia. So yes, no diagnosis. So they came thinking, people have been saying to bring him to this, he was actually, they bringing him because people were like, you know, they've been saying he needs an assessment, he needs assessment. We're like, there's nothing wrong with him. It's normal, you know? And so here they were in the office and I was like, you were right. So his aunt and his mom was like, oh, you know, they felt like, thank goodness someone like agrees like that he's okay, you know? And this is where you observe, right? You just observe as you would any of your children, and you just see like, where does it go? You know, as a spiritual person, you know, I didn't say this, but in my head, I was like, they just moved into a new home. So I was like, I didn't want to say anything,
Oh my
you know,
goodness.
but if he said that they were bringing harm to him, then I would still put no diagnosis, but I would recommend like something, because for him not to function, you know, like if he was afraid or if, you know, then it's like what Cher was saying, his functioning is at stake. Like we got to make sure he's safe, everybody in the house is safe, right? So, and he's too young for diagnosis, right? So definitely, like I would put some caution, look up some resources for the family. But that was my number one question, like, you know, are you, you know, is he saying to do bad things? Which is usually what hallucinations, they tell them to do bad things. He's like, no, you know? And so I felt like, okay, that's good. That's really good for a 3-year-old. Let him be a happy 3-year-old, run around the playground with his imaginary friend, you know? And the fact, it kind of spooked me though when he said he's in the room with him right now. That did spook me because I didn't experience that, you know, with my kids. So I was like, oh, he's in the room right now. But, you know, he definitely, yeah, is C, no diagnosis. And he was the sweetest, cutest kid. He was very kind, gentle. So that's the end. We've got to the end. So we asked questions all along. Are there any questions that you have about any of the vignettes or any of the diagnoses before we conclude?
I have one. It's kind of bothering me.
Okay.
How much do therapists say that it would be more of a nature versus nurture in most of the diagnosis?
So it's a
The
combination.
age-old question.
Yeah, I think it's a combination. But what do you think, Babette?
Well, definitely I thought about with the conduct disorder. I thought about how an environment might impact or a conduct disorder, you know.
Yeah.
So that the conduct disorder could pose like a good argument for nature versus nurture on either side of it, because when you look at, you have some people who are a result of their environment, you know, often getting into fights, bullying, threatening, uh cruelty to people, animals, that kind of stuff. Sometimes when you're in an environment that normalize certain behaviors, you know, it's not far-fetched to see some of these aggression in people. So I think only the conduct disorder, I think, could give like a good argument for nature versus nurture. But I mean, that's like a slippery slope question. So you can always find an argument for nature versus nurture, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's almost like which came first, the chicken or the egg. Yeah, it's true.
Right.
It's a very good question that you pose, Cheryl. You know, that although, like, for example, autism is a diagnosis that's of development, and actually in the DSM, there in the when I working with a child that was at CPS has their own they have their own I mean, it's not an official diagnosis, but they've seen so many cases that they have seen a few where autistic behavior was brought on because of the environment.
Mm-hmm.
This is very, very shocking, and like poses to your question that it can happen both. And you're like, well, how could that happen? It's not internal, it's not hereditary. How could
Mm-hmm.
someone get autism from your environment? And they found from these abusive cases, where maybe they grew up in a crib, right? When they didn't have a bed, and for so long they stayed in a crib. They had that childlike mentality, how they were treated. And so, they don't speak, they don't read, because of
Yeah.
the state that they were in the environment,
Right.
that causes them to have autistic delays. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
motor skills, speech problems, walking problems, just like someone who has this developmental autistic behavior. So that's just an example that you can get from both. Yeah, from both.
I think also,
Thank you.
I think also too, Katrina, I think I recall coming across a paper that had looked at schizophrenia in the United Kingdom, and how rampant it is with the Caribbean population. It's been so long, it's been many years. But if my memory serves me right, it was the environmental difference. Having leave, it's like the cold, everything about England. The having to, it's like you're leaving one kind of easygoing uh, situation or culture to another fast-paced culture, where you might not have like a lot of support, and you might have to struggle a little bit more. So there was this paper that I came across that was pretty much looking at how the environment may play a role in schizophrenia. Maybe people do have the predisposition for schizophrenia, but the change of environment kind of bring it on, if
Yes.
that makes sense.
Yes, it does, Babette, because you know what? You got my wheels turning. I'm like, that makes sense with like depression, just simple depression, right? That
Oh yeah.
people could, they don't have depression, but then you notice an onset of all of a sudden, how come between September and February, when it's cold, all of a sudden people get depressed, right? Some
Wow.
people get really like depressed, but then during the summer and spring months, they're fine. And that's how they came up with seasonal depression, right? So that's an example of the environment having an effect on us. right? So yeah, I could see, I'm seeing more diagnoses that can possibly definitely come about, definitely by the environment. Of course,
Yeah.
anxiety, we know that,
Right.
you know, but it
Yeah.
can be, we predispose, as you're saying, you
Right.
know, because sometimes our parents have it, you know, even with substance abuse, you know, like addictive behavior. It's not just the environment, but, you know, you can
Might have a genetic
argue the other,
predisposition. Yeah.
yeah, argue the other way, you know, your dad had it, so you had it. It runs in your family, you know, alcohol abuse, you know. So I say it's a combination of both.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
you can always make an argument for it. That's just a slippery slope right there.
Yeah, yeah. And I
Maybe
guess that's why we
first
look at
nurture.
symptoms, you know, we look at history, we look at everything about the person.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So
that is why the psychosocial assessment is very, very important, because you need to know the history, not just the presenting symptoms that you might see a patient with. You have to dig a little bit deeper to see what is really going on, or
yeah,
the history of that person.
yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Our next one is going to be the 14th of May, May 14th. So don't miss that one. It's a Friday again at 7 o'clock. And I'm going to also, this one is going to be spiritual. We need to put a spiritual one in there. We haven't done one in a while, since January, actually. So I'm thinking of doing controversial scriptures. We're going to discuss that, you know, very interesting. You know, everybody usually has their opinions, and I love hearing like the different opinions, but definitely some of my feedback on some controversial people in the Bible, women, men, scriptures. It'll be very interesting. So definitely, hopefully I'll see you guys at that time. Thank you so much for coming. And I will see you next month. Okay, anybody want to say anything
Thank
before we
you.
leave?
Thank you, Patrina.
Yeah.
I will see you next time.
Okay, see
Thank
you
you.
next time.
Good time.
Bye.
Bye.
All right,
Bye
Katrina.
all.
Bye. Bye.